And you've also got a multiple number of reports in newspapers in the last few days about his alleged extensive use of drugs, including ketamine and ecstasy and Adderall. Let's talk about Elon for a moment. You know, he's gone out in a blaze of mayhem with these posts. But if you look at him and his brand, how damaged has he been by the last few months?
Well, it ends up here. So traveling around with your own pill box of Adderall, ketamine, ecstasy, and mushrooms while cutting off funding for antiretroviral drugs to pregnant women with HIV, such that right now, according to the Associate Professor of Global Affairs, Brooke Nichols, there are 1,500 babies being born HIV positive because of these cuts. It ends up that when the wealthiest man in the world is killing the poorest children in the world, it ends up that's bad for business.
All right, this is pretty damn epic and was a lot of fun to watch. But believe it or not, Piers Morgan finally took a break from former President Joe Biden to return to the present and dedicated an entire episode of Piers Morgan Uncensored to the topic of Elon Musk's public attacks on Trump's one big beautiful bill. And instead of the typical panel, it was just a 1-versus-1 debate that Piers Morgan moderated between MAGA-friendly businessman and Shark Tank co-host Kevin O'Leary and Scott Galloway, a professor, an entrepreneur, a man who is an advocate for men's issues from a liberal perspective, and the co-host of Raging Moderates with Jessica Tarloff, which you should definitely check out. Now, a lot of clips I'm going to show you, but I want to start with this one here because Piers Morgan tries to defend at the very end Donald Trump's ridiculous slapdash, absurd tariff policy, and Scott Galloway just utterly dismantles it and leaves Piers Morgan speechless.
And you've also got a multiple number of reports in newspapers in the last few days about his alleged extensive use of drugs, including ketamine and ecstasy and Adderall. Let's talk about Elon for a moment. You know, he's gone out in a blaze of mayhem with these posts. But if you look at him and his brand, how damaged has he been by the last few months?
Well, it ends up here. So traveling around with your own pill box of Adderall, ketamine, ecstasy, and mushrooms while cutting off funding for antiretroviral drugs to pregnant women with HIV, such that right now, according to the Associate Professor of Global Affairs, Brooke Nichols, there are 1,500 babies being born HIV positive because of these cuts. It ends up that when the wealthiest man in the world is killing the poorest children in the world, it ends up that's bad for business. And you have European nations that have seen a decline in Tesla sales anywhere from 20% in France to 65% in Northern European countries. And in the US, sales are down 11%. Right now, Tesla's sales are declining faster than any automobile company in the world. So his brand, the Tesla brand, according to Ipsos, has gone from the 7th most aspirational brand in the world amongst the likes of Apple and Microsoft and Amazon to the 95th place. So I think people have decided, I mean, quite frankly, this distinct of the morality of what estimates are that 300,000 children have died so far because of the cuts to USA. Distinct of that, let's just talk about this economically. You're seeing a brand erosion, the likes of which we've never seen before. And quite frankly, the 75% of Republicans who these programs appeal to more would never consider buying an EV. So from a straight kind of business standpoint, to go so red pill and to be seen as this cruel and this coarse, distinct of the moral implications, distinct of the reduction in soft power that America enjoys, distinct of our reputation as the good guys being trashed. This is just really bad for business for Tesla.
So it's so funny, because again, before Scott Galloway responds, it's frustrating that Piers Morgan pitches himself as a nonpartisan journalist, right? Not a political commentator like me who has his biases. and Donald Trump is president, and yet Piers Morgan has dedicated no episodes of Piers Morgan Uncensored to debating the merits of Trump's tariff policy to the extent that, Trump's corruption is involved. So, it's always like, well, what are the potential economic ramifications couched in other issues as well. But what about Trump's corruption? What about this sort of conversation? Like, Piers, imagine what you would be discussing if this were Hunter Biden, and maybe extend that level of ethical standard to the sitting president of the United States, even though he happens to be a buddy of yours. How about you dedicate an entire panel to Trump's corrupt incentives versus the tariff outcomes? How about that? So this is the closest that we've gotten so far. Here's how Scott responds.
He was bored and he pulled out his phone and began showing me and a couple of other people just on his phone the Optimus humanoid robots and where they've got to. And they were dancing in this video clip. And it was one of the most extraordinary things I've seen. And he said, these are going to be the biggest thing in the world within 15 years. And everyone's going to have one, or rich people will want 10. And they're going to change the world. They're going to do every boring thing in the world you could possibly wish them to do. And he had a kind of boyish enthusiasm for this technology. And that made me just look at him and think, why do you need all the aggravation of politics? It's like it's brought him so much aggravation. And yet, as you said, Kevin, he's a genius, really, in many other ways. I mean, do you accept, Scott, that he's a genius, or do you feel it's smoke and mirrors with Musk? Because when I watched him talk me through his Optimus thing, I just saw the 10-year-old boy who used to write programs doing it on a massive scale and loving that. Whereas I think he's really struggled with the criticism he's had in the political arena.
I don't think you can deny his genius. I'll use Starlink on my flight to London in a couple days, and it's a superior product. I owned a Tesla. But somehow we've decided in America that innovation and money replaces or obviates or excuses depravity. Cutting off aid to HIV-positive mothers, deciding what veterans should get benefits, cutting off SNAP payments, which have shown to have a positive net return when people run out of money for food at the end of the month. I mean, I think one of the wonderful things about being an American, and quite frankly, for me, what it means to be a man and what I try to teach my boys, is the whole point of prosperity is such that you can protect people. And I think the two of you are more impressed with Mr. Musk than I am. I think if somebody is making Nazi salutes, if somebody is being sued concurrently by two women for sole custody of their child because that person has not spent any time with that child, when someone is so severely addicted to drugs they can't get their shit together to show up to the White House without looking exceptionally high, I don't think that's the right role model for young men. So what I would ask to all of us is look at what money has done to us. That if someone can land a rocket on metal scissors or create a great AV, he's a genius. He's the wealthiest man in the world. But does that mean we should excuse depravity? Does that mean, unlike Bill Gates, he's not using his billions to help people? He's not planting trees, the shade of which he won't sit under? I think this is an individual who has literally come off the tracks, who is rabidly addicted to drugs, and is using his immense power to get people elected, and that too many of us excuse what is abhorrent behavior. I think his legacy is not going to be an EV or putting rockets into space. I think it's going to be unnecessary death, disease, and disability of the world's most vulnerable. That is not what it means to be an innovator. It's not what it means to be an American. It's not what it means to be a man.
I mean, Piers Morgan, if you've seen him on other interviews, other debates, he has no problem interrupting, interjecting, heckling, doing whatever. I mean, he's a very good debater when he wants to be. He's a very good debate host. He's a very good interviewer, and he knows how to do that British style of adversarial interview extremely well, like Mehdi Hossein. Okay, Piers Morgan is no lightweight, but he was stunned. He had nothing to refute any of that. The obvious, unprecedented, blatant corruption of the Trump administration, which is objectively far worse and far greater than anything out of Biden, Obama, Clinton, probably than all of them combined. And Piers knows that, and he prefers Donald Trump. Because of their long-standing friendship. You know, he was on The Celebrity Apprentice, as he'll tell you in other episodes. You know, the fact that Trump has been good for Piers Morgan's, and Piers Morgan is killing it on YouTube. This guy knows what to do, but he also knows he's smart. On the merits, Trump is inferior. Trump is intellectually and morally inferior to any Democrat, and Piers knows it. So when you have somebody like Scott Galloway who's able to make the case and not do it bombastically, you know, if I were on there and others are on there, you know, we tend to get heated and bombastic, and you know, it's fun. But Scott Galloway is just, and he's cool as a cucumber, man. He is. And maybe that was that, you know, helped make the delivery of that so persuasive. But Piers was speechless. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video. And if you stuck around to the end, you can drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.